Hey, BYD is planning a new assembly plant in Mexico. Is that their way into the North American market? There's a new flood of money flowing into EV charging, baby, and I like the sound of that. Ford has cut the pricing of the Mach E, and they add some big incentives for the F-150 Lightning, so now's the time to buy. The new Model 3 Performance has been spotted in the wild. That must mean it's on the way soon. And CNBC went all the way to Norway to learn about electric cars, but they didn't talk to Bjorn Nyland? What the heck, man? It is Tuesday, February 20th, 2024. Let's get to it. Hey, y'all. Happy Tuesday. We're more than halfway through February. It's coming to a close. March is coming. Spring is coming. Everything's looking good, right? So, what's going on in the world of EVs today? Well, I saw an article about BYD doing a feasibility study about putting an assembly plant in Mexico. And, I've been saying for a while that these Chinese EV makers are going to be looking for a way into the U.S. market. And it would be either through acquisition of a U.S. based or North American based company, or building plants here. And here you go. They're talking about building an assembly plant in North America to get around a lot of the rules that are in place against Chinese auto manufacturers coming into the U.S. And, there's a lot of people in the U.S. auto market. Elon himself even said that could spell doom for U.S. automakers. And, I don't know if it spells doom, but it certainly means they're going to have to step up their game because, as we've talked about many times, the Chinese EV makers are really, really good at making EVs and at making them at affordable prices. Now, some of that might just be the fact that the Chinese government subsidizes so much of it and allows them to sort of flood the market with cheap vehicles, much like they do with steel and other things all over the world. So, whether you can argue the right and the wrong of that, whether it's good or bad, but they do that, and the ultimate winner a lot of times is the consumer. And in Europe, people are buying EVs at low prices, and they're well-made EVs. I mean, like I said, BYD, Neo, XPeng, they're coming. They're trying to find a way into the U.S. market, and they're gonna find a way in. And I just think if I was Ford, GM, Stellantis, even companies like Rivian, Lucid, or even like the Japanese automakers, like the Hondas and the Subarus of the world, the Nissans that have plants in the U.S. It's going to keep them on their toes. They're going to have to really, innovate, bring a lot of cool tech to their vehicles, and I think again, it's just going to be making high quality, low cost vehicles, whether they're ICE or EV, but in this case EV, to really be able to stay ahead of the game. So, those Chinese automakers are coming, and they're looking for a way in, and they're going to find it. So, the U.S. automakers are really going to have to make sure they're ready. And I think that just means, once again, quality at an affordable price. They're going to have to be more efficient with their manufacturing, and stay at the top of the game. They have to produce quality products, not just fit and finish and panel gaps, but tech. They've got to stay ahead of the game tech-wise, because basically these days, even ICE cars now, but certainly EVs, are basically just giant tech products that drive around the road at high speed. I mean, that's what they are, and that's the only way to stay ahead of the Chinese competitors, because they're coming. I also saw an article about was from Clean Technica, who I love these guys, that there's more and more money flowing into EV charging. I think that's obvious. I mean, obviously the NEVI funded chargers are going to ground this year. Ionna's coming on. Pilot Flying J, EVgo, GM, the whole Ultium charging network that they're putting out there. There's a lot of money being poured into EV charging. Why? Because EVs are on the march, and the money, it usually knows what's coming, right? They always say follow the money. Well, in this case, you should. I mean, the reality is that EVs are the future, and some would argue even they're kind of the present right now, but they're certainly the future. And if you look at where the money is going this year, again, I think EV sales may not be blockbuster this year, but the charging infrastructure is going to be upgraded to such an extent over the next probably 18 months or so that going into the second half of 25 and into 26, 27 and on, it's going to be much easier to buy an EV because the charging infrastructure is going to be so much improved. And, that's the way it has to be. And I think a lot of these car makers kind of understand that now. I think they got ahead of themselves. Tesla set the bar, as we all know. They built out their charging network before they had an affordable EV on the road and before they went like full on mass market. And that made it easier to own a Tesla because you knew that if you bought one, you'd be able to charge it, right? A lot of the car companies saw how successful Tesla was at selling cars. They just decided they wanted to make EVs, and they never really thought about the charging infrastructure. Just cutting some kind of a deal with EA or EVgo for, free charging for 2 years or whatever. That wasn't enough. They needed to really take charge and build out the networks. That's now happening. So follow the money. EVs are coming. And, along the same lines, Ford has cut the price on Mach-E and added some big-time incentives for the F-150 Lightnings. So, with the Mach-E, not only is there the $7,500 tax credit, they're offering a $7,500 discount on top of that. So, basically, you can buy a Mach-E for like $13,000 less than, list price. And, that's smart for Ford right now. They've got to sell those cars. And again, I think, 2024 is not going to be a blockbuster year for sales for EVs. I think it's going to be up, but just not, I don't think it's going to be up, significantly. And so they got to move these cars. And I think one of the other reasons too, besides just that it's kind of a lull year, is I've said it before, like Ford's already, everyone knows that the 2025 model year is going to have the NACS port native. Why would you buy a car that in less than a year or so is going to be outdated as far as the charging port? You wouldn't, right? So, I think that's going to hurt sales a little bit, but they just, I get it. They're trying to move the inventory, and if you're interested in an EV and you're sort of like, well, I don't know, I'm not sure if I want one. They're expensive. Mach-E's are decent cars. I don't think they're great. I don't think they're the best one out there. But for the money now, it's becoming a pretty good value, especially if you kind of go in the mid range. Where, if you can get a decent crossover SUV, a Mach-E, for 50-ish grand, maybe a little under, that's a pretty good deal. And again, it's Ford, so. While it might not be the most spectacular, mind-blowing vehicle in the world, there's Ford dealers literally everywhere. So you really don't have to worry about service or parts or any of that kind of stuff. So I think it's pretty solid. And, giving some incentives on the F-150 Lightning makes sense too. They're really trying to convince truck guys that, electric trucks are the way to go. And I think it's the same with trucks as it is with any car out there on the road these days. There are people that just aren't ready to accept EVs yet. And, in the guys that drive trucks, or people that drive trucks, I should say, they, same thing. And, especially if you drive a truck for work, there's a lot of skepticism about how far can you go and da-da-da. But really, when you think about it, an F-150 Lightning with that giant frunk, that alone to me is like totally worth it, because just the amount of gear that you can carry in a pickup truck now has increased so much, because and it's lockable, dry storage that you can keep your tools in and keep a lot of other gear in the frunk. You don't have to worry about stuff being in the back, someone stealing it, and so it just makes a lot of sense. I think if you're using a truck for work, just the fact that the onboard power, the storage, the fact that it is a truck, man. Those F-150 Lightnings are no joke. They're just as tough as any other F-150. Maybe when it comes to towing, you'll lose some range, but, if you're just, it's just a worksite truck, it's hard to beat, really. But you just have to give it a try. That's the real thing. So, And then we saw that the Model 3 Performance has been spotted out there in the wild. There's some pictures of a camouflage version and charging out in California, I believe it was. And it looks pretty slick. I mean, I don't think it's going to be like the old Model 3 Performance. It's basically going to look almost the same as all the other Model 3s, right? It's just going to have a lot more power, right? But it looks like the newer Performance model has like cool, like almost like racing seats, kind of a little bit different interior. I wonder what else will be different on the inside, if anything. Like, the new Model 3s have the screen in the back. Will these have something in addition to that? Not just the screen in the back. Will there be anything different as far as the steering wheel? Will it look a little different? Will there be any kind of other interior design changes? Something to look forward to. And are they going to call it Ludicrous? That's always been the rumor, that they're going to call this, instead of Model 3 Performance, it's going to be the Model 3 Ludicrous. I really hope that they call it Ludicrous. That's such an Elon thing to do. And all the Tesla fanboys will love that. Me being one, even though I don't have a Tesla. That would probably make me consider the Model 3 Performance for my next car if they called it Ludicrous. I would love that. So I hope they do that. And then the last thing I saw, CNBC actually put out, it's like over a half hour long, a whole video about how Norway has become the EV capital of the world, which obviously if you're watching this, you probably know that Norway is the EV capital of the world. And, they went over and talked to people from the government and some people that are out there, building charging infrastructure. But they didn't talk to Bjorn. Like, how you go to Norway to talk about electric vehicles and you don't talk to Bjorn Nyland? What the heck? Holy macaroni, right? And you think that they missed out on an opportunity to talk to Bjorn, who knows so much about electric vehicles, and he's in Norway. He's right there in Oslo. I mean, what would Bjorn say? Oh, shit, right? So I think that was a big mistake on CNBC's part. The video was really good otherwise. I think there's a few things they don't quite get, but otherwise it was really good. It's just like, I don't get how you go to Norway to talk about electric vehicles and you don't at least have a few minutes with Bjorn Nyland. He's the man for electric vehicles in Europe these days, certainly in Norway. So big miss, but otherwise, I'll link that video below. You can check it out because it's actually pretty good. And it's basically about why is Norway doing so well with electric cars and the U.S. isn't. And there's a lot of obvious reasons. I mean, Norway's only got a population of around 5 million. It's like the size of New Mexico. So, in the U.S., it's just everything's bigger and a bigger issue and a bigger problem. The charging infrastructure here, compared to what it needs to be in Norway. And even in Norway, there's still areas in Norway where it's not quite sufficient yet. I mean, although it's very robust. Just think about the U.S. here. I mean, how many wide swaths of area we have where there's just nothing, but like farmland or desert. And, we have these big congested cities where putting charging in seems like a no-brainer, but it's like, where do you put it, right? So, anyways, it was a good video. It's just, you can't leave out Bjorn, man. That makes no sense. Anyway, that's it. That's all I got for today. So, just keep in mind, it's a good time to be in the EV space. EVs are awesome, and it's okay to be awesome. See you next time. Hey y'all, happy Tuesday here in 20